The Knicks have a new head coach finally. The lamest excuse I have ever heard that actually worked. And history could be made at this year's baseball amateur draft, and this is a name you're going to want to remember. It's all coming up right now on a new edition of Gordon Damer on Sports. All right, welcome into another edition of Gordon Damer on Sports. Great to have you along today. We've got a jam-packed podcast, so let's get into it. As I said, the Knicks have finally introduced Mike Brown as their new head coach, so I've got some thoughts I want to share there. I think the world has lost its mind. Well, I know the world has lost its mind, but I got a story for you. And I want to know if somebody used this excuse on you, whether you would buy it or not. Maybe it's because I'm a parent that I am skeptical. Maybe it's the world that has made me cynical. But I gotta believe that most people would see right through this. But we'll get to that a little bit later on. But before we dive too deep, a quick favor. Hit that subscribe button, leave a rating or a review. It really does help the podcast grow. All right, let's get into it. The story I wanted to start with today is something that's a little different. So Sunday is the first round of the Major League Baseball amateur draft. And even if you're a diehard sports fan, you might be saying to yourself, so? Because in the race of the big three sports, when it comes to the draft, baseball is by far a distant third. Now, a part of that is for actually a bunch of reasons. First off, because unlike the NFL or the NBA, we don't know these guys, right? Football in just about any form is our national religion at this point, and college football is big business on Saturdays. And college basketball, it has the benefit of the tournament and the appeal of which is almost exclusively gambling, right? Everyone fills out an office pool sheet, even if the first round games are the first time you watched college basketball that year. College baseball draftees are just names on a screen. High schoolers from Georgia or JUCO guys from somewhere you'd have to Google. The only recognizable names are sometimes the last names because their dad played in the majors and you knew him. So even with college baseball growing, and it has grown, it's still not in the same stratosphere as the other two. And then there's the fact that football guys, if you get drafted in the first couple of rounds, you're generally expected to contribute right away. Same thing in the NBA, right? You come in right away, especially if you're a first-round pick, and you are expected to contribute. Baseball guys, they get drafted, and a lot of time you don't hear about them for a while. Sometimes you never hear the names ever again. But here's the thing. This year's baseball draft has a story that actually matters and a name you might want to learn now. That name is Seth Hernandez. So why is Seth Hernandez different? Well, he's different because he has the chance to do something nobody has ever done before. All right, let me hit you with a stat. The baseball draft began 60 years ago, 1965. Rick Monday was the first player ever drafted. But in all those years, a high school right-handed pitcher has never been taken with the first overall pick. Never, not once. So that means of the almost 1,700 picks that have been made in the first round since 1965, covering 6 decades of scouting reports and radar guns, not a single high school right-handed pitcher has gone 1-1. But here we are in 2025, and Seth Hernandez, a 6'4" right-hander from Corona High School in Southern California, is at the center of the baseball world. Not just mentioned, not just rising, he's in the conversation to be the number 1 overall pick in the baseball draft. The kind of pitcher scouts drive cross-country to see, the kind of arm that forces front offices to reconsider long-standing draft strategies. And this is not just hype, this is results. His fastball lives in the upper 90s, flirts with triple digits. His changeup has already drawn plus grades from multiple organizations. His slider is tight, late-breaking, deceptive, and is well ahead of schedule for a teenager. His mechanics are clean, his command is advanced, his pitchability is elite. He's not just overpowering lesser competition, he's also outthinking them, outworking them, and doing it by all accounts with a maturity beyond his years. And yet somehow when the game speeds up, Hernandez somehow slows down. That's the part that keeps coming up in conversations with scouts, executives, and former big leaguers. They talk about his presence, his calm, the way the moment never seems too big. You hear the words composed and professional and unflappable. He's been called the most complete high school pitcher evaluators have seen in a decade. Off the field, checks all the boxes too. He's sharp, polished in interviews, confident, grounded. He's got charisma, leadership qualities, a reputation as a great teammate, and all the intangible stuff organizations crave in a franchise cornerstone that they're drafting in the first round. You could easily imagine him as the face of a team's rebuild or the centerpiece of a marketing campaign. So with all that going for him, the production, the stuff, the makeup, what could possibly be holding him back? One thing, he throws with the wrong arm. He's right-handed, and somehow that's his biggest flaw. All right, let's go back in time. As I said, 1965, 320 high school right-handed pitchers have been taken in the first round of the baseball draft. So that's a massive number, more than any single position group in the draft, and it'll be 321 when Hernandez joins them on Sunday. Now let's compare that to high school lefties. Fewer of them overall, fewer taken high, but still 3 have gone number 1 overall. David Clyde in 1973, Brian Taylor in 1991, and Brady Aiken in 2014. You want to guess how many of them had long, successful careers? In fact, you probably don't know any of their names. Well, none of them. And each of them was their own cautionary tale. David Clyde had the longest major league career of the 3. Back in 73, he was billed as the next Sandy Koufax, left-hander from Westchester High School in Houston, who was flat out dominant. And the original plan for him was let him pitch a couple of games in the majors to get some buzz going, and then send him down to the minors to actually develop, like literally every other 18-year-old in the history of the sport. Problem is, Bob Short, the Rangers owner at the time, had other ideas. The team was struggling financially, attendance was dragging, and he saw Clyde as a box office attraction, a quick fix. So instead of learning how to pitch professionally in the minors, Clyde was thrown right into the deep end, right to the show, no minor league innings, no time to develop, just the weight of this franchise put squarely on his shoulders. And at first, it kind of worked. Clyde's debut was electric and the ballpark was sold out. The Rangers were suddenly relevant in a way they hadn't been in a very long time. But of course, as you can figure out, magic didn't last. He posted an ERA of 5 in his rookie season across 18 starts. The next year, it was even worse. By 75, he was battling shoulder issues, went down to the minors, and was never really the same. He bounced around, had a brief stint with the Cleveland Indians, tried to come back with the Astros, but the damage was done. His arm never really recovered, and his career fizzled before it really began. He became the poster boy for rushing young arms to the major leagues. But you know what? Here's the complicated part of it. David Clyde actually may have saved the Rangers franchise because the hype he generated, the ticket sales, the attention, it arguably kept the team afloat long enough to avoid relocation or being taken over by the league. So that's the first guy. Then there was Brian Taylor. He was a flamethrower from a tiny little school in North Carolina who absolutely dominated in his high school. His numbers were like a video game. 29-6, an ERA of 1.25. He had 213 strikeouts in 88 innings. His fastball was clocking high 90s. The Yankees made him their number 1 overall pick in 91, their first ever number 1 overall pick. Scott Boras was his agent, and Boras was already building the legend. Years later, he would still say that Brian Taylor was the best high school pitcher he had ever seen. So initially, there was some contract drama, as there generally is with Scott Boras. Yankees offered $300,000. Boras wasn't having it. He was pointing to Todd Van Poppel's deal the year before, told the Yankees to pay up. At the time, George Steinbrenner was suspended, but even from the sidelines, he made it clear if they let this kid get away, they should be shot. So the Yankees caved. They signed Taylor for a contract of just over $1.5 million, which was a record-setting deal at the time. And in the minors, at least early on, Brian Taylor looked the part. And then, of course, everything fell apart. In December of 93, got into a fist fight while defending his brother in a bar in North Carolina. He threw a wild punch. He missed, tore his shoulder apart. The damage was so severe, Dr. Frank Jobe, the guy who invented Tommy John surgery, called it one of the worst injuries he had ever seen. Taylor missed the entire 94 season, tried to come back, but was never the same. The Yankees never got a single pitch out of Brian Taylor. Then the final guy of the 3 left-handers who went number 1 overall is Brady Aiken. Now, Brady Aiken, he was the number 1 pick in the 2014 draft. He was a left-handed phenom, smooth delivery, sky-high potential, and he was drafted by the Astros. They offered him a $6.5 million signing bonus, but then came a red flag. During his physical, it revealed some inflammation in his throwing elbow. So the Astros got a bit of cold feet. They slashed their offer to $5 million, and Aiken said no. Just like that, the top pick in the draft went unsigned. It was the first time that had happened in over 30 years. But this wasn't just about Aiken. The Astros draft plan from that point unraveled. Because they didn't sign Aiken, they lost out on money for other draftees. The 5th-round pick, Jacob Knicks, came from the same bonus pool tied to Aiken. So when Aiken didn't sign, that money vanished. Another kid drafted in the 21st round, Mac Marshall, also walked. So Aiken tried to bounce back at IMG Academy, but in his very first start, he felt elbow pain. Turns out Houston's concerns were spot on. He needed Tommy John surgery, the exact injury that tanked the deal. Another little sidebar, as a result of not signing Aiken, the Astros were awarded the 2nd pick the following year in the draft in 2015. They used that pick to select a guy by the name of Alex Bregman. So those are the only 3 left-handed high schoolers ever drafted number 1 overall. The high school right-handers, they've been left waiting. So why are teams so hesitant to take a high school right-hander number 1 overall? Well, at the end of the day, high school pitchers, especially the longer we go on, they're just very high risk. It's not just about the mechanics or the durability. It's about projection, injury risk, long development paths. These are 18-year-old kids, sometimes still growing, asking a team to use the 1st overall pick and the highest signing bonus on a player who might be 4, 5, 6 years away from the majors is a pretty tough sell. Even tougher when college baseball is now producing elite arms who are ready in 2 years, sometimes less. Think Paul Skeens or Steven Strasburg. Sandy Alderson, who's had a long career in Major League Baseball doing just about everything, said you can't predict a high school right-handed pitcher is going to be can't miss. And with the number 1 overall pick, you really need that pick to be can't miss. All right, so it's pretty simple, right? Well, no, actually it's not, because the part that really makes your brain hurt is statistically, high school pitchers, both righties and lefties, have a higher success rate in reaching the majors than high school position players taken in the 1st round. According to Baseball Reference, 60.6% of high school right-handed pitchers drafted in the 1st round reached the majors. For lefties, it's even higher, 61.2%. For high school position players, just 58. But getting to the majors isn't the same as making an impact when you get there. Only a small percentage of high school pitchers drafted, just over 22%, go on to produce any meaningful value in the big leagues. When you look at first-rounders who truly make an impact, high school pitchers are the worst bet on the board. College players just offer a shorter development curve, fewer variables, more data, more refinement, and teams kind of know more what they're buying. So if you're the Nationals and you're picking first on Sunday, why would you bet on the demographic with the least track record of high-end baseball success? And the Nats, they've done okay with the number 1 overall pick in the past. 3rd time that they're going to have that pick. The other 2, Bryce Harper and Steven Strasburg. So another quick story. Back in 1990, the Braves had the number 1 overall pick. And the top high school pitching prospect in the country was this Texas fireballer named Todd Van Poppel. He had the body, the velocity, the polish. Sounds familiar, right? He also had Scott Boras as his agent, and he had a commitment to the University of Texas. And that's when the word spreads. He wants a major league contract and a massive bonus. So the Braves decide we're not going down that road. Other teams follow suit. Van Poppel falls to 14. He signed with the Oakland A's. He's in the majors a year later, but he never lives up to the hype. Shoulder issues, control issues, development was rushed. He also becomes another cautionary tale, not just about the risk of taking a high school pitcher early, but the dangers of rushing them once you do. Now, Sandy Alderson, who was the A's GM at the time, later admitted he had told the Yankees not to do the same thing with Brian Taylor the following year. They also didn't listen. Now, as for the Braves, they decided they didn't want Van Poppel. Instead, they pivoted, and they decided to take a switch-hitting shortstop out of Jacksonville, Florida, a kid by the name of Chipper Jones. All right, let's bring it back to 2025. If you were casting a movie about the baseball draft this year, Seth Hernandez would be right out of central casting. He screams modern ace. He's also been an infielder, an outfielder. He's a pretty good hitter as well. This past year, he led his Corona High School to a 30-3 record and the CIF Southern Sectional Division I Championship. On the mound, 9-0, an ERA of 0.62. Struck out 73 and walked just 15 in 56 innings. He also only hit one batter all season. That jumps out. Usually high schoolers who throw that hard, hit a bunch of batters, walk a bunch of batters, not him. And here's the kicker. This is the first year he was playing high school baseball at a high level. He had been homeschooled up to that point. So 33 games, that's it. That's the sample size. And it was still enough to make him the Gatorade National Player of the Year, joining a list that includes Alex Rodriguez, Clayton Kershaw, Gary Sheffield, and a bunch of others. So he might be as close to a safe bet as a high school pitcher can be, but the forces working against him are more than personal. They're structural, right? The college pipeline is stronger than ever, especially with tech and analytics and advanced coaching. The injury risk for any pitcher is real, and teams have gotten burned by taking pitchers early and watch them break down before they can get to the majors. And then with the number one pick, the optics matter. If you take a high school righty and he flames out, you're the team that made the worst kind of mistake, a preventable one. So the answer to our big question, will Seth Hernandez go number one? Will a high school right-hander ever go 1-1? The answer is probably not. Not because they're not worthy, but because the risk to reward ratio at that draft slot is so skewed and so unforgiving that it might just be the smart move to never make it. And that kind of is the tragedy of it, because the better college development gets, the harder it's going to be for the best prep arms to rise to the top, unless, I don't know, in a few years, kids are throwing 105 or 106 and locating 4 pitches at 18 years old. Teams are always going to find a safer bet. So what is next for Seth Hernandez? Well, he's going to get drafted. He's going to go in the first round, almost certainly in the top 10, probably in the top 5, although that's still a little bit up in the air. And who knows, maybe he'll go as high as number 2 if a team really wants to swing big. And if he pans out and becomes an ace, maybe, just maybe, he won't just be the answer to the trivia question. He might change the calculus for the next generation. All right, let's move on to Mike Brown being officially introduced as the new Knicks head coach. And I'll say one thing right off the top. Mike Brown is a fine head coach. He's qualified. He's got a track record. He's got experience. He's coached superstars before. He's been a coach of the year. He's worked under some of the best minds in the game. At his introductory press conference, he said all the right things. This was not Adam Gase 2.0 by any stretch of the imagination. He smiled. He looked comfortable. He thanked Mr. Dolan. He praised the players, said he's excited. He talked about the culture, talked about championships. It was all very on script, very professional, very polished, which is what you would expect from somebody like Mike Brown. But there's one thing, I couldn't help get one line stuck in my head, one particular piece of coach speak that was just a little too neat. And it was, quote, "Our goal, starting with Mr. Dolan to Leon to the players, all the way down to the fans, is to build sustainable winning culture that produces championships," right? Build a sustainable winning culture that produces championships. And look, that's a great sentiment. That's the kind of thing you're supposed to say at your opening press conference. That's the quote that everybody will remember. And it's the kind of quote everybody nods along to. Yeah, right, of course, that's perfect. It is also the kind of quote that kind of bugs me, because the sustained winning that he talks about, that comes second. The championship is not some faraway goal or idea that hopefully the Knicks will achieve somewhere in the future, somewhere down the road. That's the expectation from year one. From jump, we can all agree. Knick fan, Knick hater, somewhere in between. This is not about building. The building is done. The roster is here. By firing Tom Thibodeau, as the Knicks did, essentially, you said that's the guy that's holding this roster back. So if your coach gets you to the Eastern Conference Finals for the first time in 25 years, and you fire him immediately after the season, what you're saying is he was the problem. And when you fire that guy without a clear replacement in mind, what you're saying are there's a bunch of options who can walk in the door and unleash the potential of this roster. The ceiling was only the ceiling because of our old coach, only because of Tom Thibodeau. So this isn't about cultivating. This isn't about some long-term 5-year plan. This is year one. This is win now. This is championship or bust for this Knicks team, a team that made the Eastern Conference Finals last year, a team that has a core group of stars in their prime, right? They're not getting any younger. And look, the Knicks clearly think this group was better than a Pacers team that took the Thunder to 7 games and may have only lost this year because they lost their point guard to a torn Achilles. So sustainable success is important. Absolutely. Everybody wants that. But that's second after you either win a championship or at the very least, you make the NBA Finals this upcoming season. So when I hear build a sustainable winning culture, that bothers me a little bit. That's a bit nebulous. How you define that is kind of up in the air. And it kind of sounds like something you say when you're trying to lower the bar a few notches, right? Something you say when you want a little bit of a cushion. And here's the thing. The Knicks don't need a cushion, and they're not getting a cushion. They can't afford one. The Knicks are not aiming for just sustainability. That's a fine goal down the road. They are aiming for a ring. That's why you made this hire. That's the assignment. That's the job. And if you don't think the pressure is real, take a look around the Eastern Conference. The pressure does not just come at the end of the season. It starts immediately. Knicks are the betting favorites to be the number 1 seed this year in the Eastern Conference. So that means, what? Look, 60 wins this year, if not more. That's the road to the number 1 seed is easier now than it was this past year. The Celtics are down. The Pacers are down. Cavs are still around, but they're a paper tiger until proven otherwise. The Bucks, they still got Giannis, but he might not stay there. And even if he does, they've been bounced in the first round the last 3 years. So who's the competition in the Eastern Conference? The Magic? The Hawks? Who? The 76ers? With the roster the Knicks have, the chemistry they already have built, the depth that they added this offseason, the road to 50-plus wins and a finals appearance has never been more open. So no, these are not just high expectations. These are the highest of expectations. And look, there's no room for excuses. And we've talked about in the past, usually high expectations going into a season does not work out real well for that team because there's only one road to accomplish what you're set to accomplish. And the Knicks, that's where they find themselves. So that's the goal. Everybody knows it. Mike Brown touched on it, but this is not about building a winning culture somewhere. No, first things first, get to the NBA Finals this year. So that's the first thing. The second thing, which brings me to the fans, because I find Knicks fans hilarious in all of this. They are the leaders in anyone as a head coach can do a better job than Tom Thibodeau. And look, when the talk was Ime Udoka or Jason Kidd or Chris Finch or Jay Wright, I could kind of see that. But that sentiment does not change with Mike Brown being the guy. And now that all the talking is done and you have your coach and all the Twitter GMs are giving it a thumbs up, I can tell you right now, if I told you when Tibbs was fired that the next coach of the Knicks was going to be Mike Brown, most of, if not all these Twitter Knicks fans who are giving this move such huge thumbs up, they would have lost their minds. Let's be honest. Mike Brown was not anyone's dream candidate. He was not plan B. He was not even plan C. And look, at the end of the day, I think that's fine because sometimes the backup plan ends up being the best plan. We were just talking about the draft, right? The Braves, when they took Chipper Jones, not their first choice, but it turned out to be the choice. And I kind of like the fact that the Knicks did not land the sexy hire. For my entire life, the Knicks have targeted the sexy hire, and that generally has been a disaster. Larry Brown, Isaiah Thomas, Phil Jackson, need I go on? But let's not rewrite history. You guys hated Tibbs. You're not just disliked, you hated. You hated the minutes, you hated the offense, you hated the rotations, you hated his stubbornness, you hated the late game management, and the organization, good for you, clearly felt the same way. They think that replacing him was not going to be hard. They thought a better option was just waiting around the corner, and now you've got it. You've got Mike Brown. And again, he should be fine. He should be good. The NBA, as I've said 1,000 times, is a talent league, and the Knicks are talented, so there's no reason that this should not succeed. So now all I ask is, much like Michael Irvin said many years ago, don't lose that intensity. Don't lose that intensity. Don't lower the bar. Don't ever make any excuses. Don't shift the goalposts. This year has to be about being the number 1 seed, about winning 50-plus games, if not 60 games, and making the NBA Finals this year because now you have your guy. You wanted Tibbs out, you got him out. And I haven't seen one fan, one reporter, one analyst, one podcast host say that Mike Brown is a problem. So guess what? No complaints. Brown's got the job. The players are here. The resources are here. The stage is set. Let's see it. Let's see the rotations now magically work. Let's see the bench get maximized like you guys think is so simple to do. Let's see the offense flow. Let's see the stars rested at just the right time. Let's see the minutes balance out perfectly. Let's see a motion offense and defensive creativity that blows everyone away. I'm sure it's going to be Shangri-La, because if it's not Shangri-La, I don't want to hear any complaining. This was the move. This was the choice. And this is your coach. And look, to Mike Brown's credit, he embraced that. He's not pretending this is anything that it's not. He's not asking for a grace period. He knows what the job is. He's taking over a team that got to the Final Four, and now the bar has been raised. And if he clears it, if he gets to the Knicks, the final, or wins a title, he goes from plan C, D, E, whatever he was, to a franchise legend just like that. And that's the opportunity sitting in front of Mike Brown. And to his credit, he is stepping into it. He has not said anything otherwise. But in conclusion, Knicks fans, you wanted to change. You got to change. You got the coach that's not stubborn. It's not inflexible, right? You got the guy that you wanted. And guess what? We're now going to find out if he can clear that bar, because the bar is sky high. And the excuses, all out of excuses. Mike Brown's here. It's time to win. It's not time to build. It's time to win. Now let's see it. Couple other things that do jump out to me about the Brown hire. And again, to be clear, I think Mike Brown is fine. Doesn't blow me away. He's a capable head coach with real experience. But one of the knocks on Tom Thibodeau was always, this guy burns out his players. That's why he's bounced around so much, right? Guys eventually tune him out. His voice gets stale. The grind of his system wears on players and teams. Here's the twist, though. Mike Brown's coaching resume reads an awful lot like Tibbs. Tibbs' first head coaching job, Chicago, he was there for 5 years. Brown's first head coaching job, Cleveland, he was there for 5 years. Tibbs' second stop, Minnesota, there for 3 years. Brown's second gig, the Lakers, he was there for 2 years. Not even 2 years. He was gone after 6 games into year 2. He goes back to Cleveland for 1 more year, then to Sacramento, 2 seasons, fired early in his third. Meanwhile, Tibbs with the Knicks lasted another 5 years. You see a pattern? Both coaches seem to burn a little hot, get a quick jolt of success, and then kind of hit a wall. So hopefully that's not going to be a problem for Mike Brown, because, again, year 1, championship or bust mentality. Also, if you read about Mike Brown, especially in The Athletic, it's not hard to see some shades of Tibbs all over him. Obsessed with practice. He's a film junkie. He's intense. Accused of being too rigid during his first go-round with the Cavaliers. He's a defensive fundamentalist who believes, like Tibbs, that the film does not lie. Now, look, I'm kind of being a little sarcastic. That stuff really only becomes a problem if the team doesn't win. And we've already established the Knicks are supposed to win and win right away. The expectations are here. Mike Brown is here. The expectations are immediate, and Brown has to step right into them. All right, last thing, let me ask you something. As a parent or as a sports fan or just someone who lives on planet Earth, does this excuse sound even remotely plausible to you? French Olympic fencer Yossouris Tybus tested positive for Osterine. It's a banned muscle-building substance, a steroid. And she was banned for 4 years, but that 4-year ban has now been overturned. Why? Because the Court of Arbitration for Sport bought her excuse. And what was the excuse exactly? She said she tested positive for steroids because she kissed her boyfriend. According to the court, her then boyfriend, American fencer Race Imboden, was taking Osterine at the time, and the claim was that the two kissed repeatedly over several days. And somehow, some way, that was enough to transfer trace amounts of the drug into her system and to trigger a positive test. I mean, are you serious? Those must have been some very intense makeout sessions. And look, I guess since he was on steroids, that kind of tracks. Maybe we need a new warning label. Caution, steroid-enhanced smooching may cause Olympic disqualification. Look, just because something is scientifically possible doesn't mean that's what actually happened. Is it plausible? I don't think so. And is it convenient? Oh, absolutely. Because now what this ruling does is open up an entire lane of excuses for athletes who test positive going forward. Because now every caught athlete has a new get out of jail free card. It wasn't me. My wife's on steroids. My husband, it's all his fault. My fiance, she's the one on steroids. Look, I blame plenty of things on my wife over the years, But I never once thought of blaming steroids on her because you know what? I don't use steroids. Now, this may have been the first time that this excuse was used, but I guarantee you it will not be the last. Once now the courts have legitimized this, the toothpaste not going back in the tube. Remember a few years back when a bunch of athletes used the, I ate tainted beef excuse? That became the hot new trend. Everyone claimed their post-workout meal was spiked with clenbuterol. There was a time where every doping story involved contaminated meat from Mexico or China. Now, all of a sudden, we're entering the romantic comedy phase of doping violations. I got caught with steroids from kissing my boyfriend. And this isn't entirely new. Richard Gasquet is a French tennis player. He got caught and tested positive for cocaine use. Back then, he claimed he got it from kissing someone at a nightclub. And you know what? He actually won the case. And I'll admit, that excuse sounds slightly more believable. Now, I don't think I would have accepted it, but a wild night at a club, some questionable decisions, stranger things have happened. But this steroids during Olympic qualifying, that seems like an unbelievable stretch to me. That does not pass the smell test. And Ostarine, I've never heard of it before, but it's banned for a reason. It enhances performance. It's not some over-the-counter vitamin C pill. It's a synthetic drug that helps you build muscle and improve stamina. And it's mind-blowing to me that they're even cheating in fencing, and fencing of all things. And it just so happens Tybus tested positive at a major competition in Paris, her home country, right before the Olympics. I mean, come on, who buys this? So yeah, maybe the science adds up in a vacuum, but we're not living in a vacuum. We're living in a world where anti-doping agencies rely on the integrity of the process, and it's hard enough to catch the cheaters already. And rulings like this are now going to chip away at that because now every athlete with a sketchy test has a built-in excuse. If you came up with this in a movie script, you would have to rewrite it because it sounds ridiculous. I caught steroids from kissing my boyfriend. You're telling me an Olympic-level athlete with doctors and trainers and nutritionists, whole support team, had no idea her boyfriend happened to be on a banned substance. What are the odds? You're telling me they didn't think that that would be a problem. And look, I guess, let's be honest, this was a Hail Mary, but it's only a Hail Mary if it doesn't work, and this one worked. And I think that that's the dangerous part because this ruling, a very flimsy one at that, makes the job of regulating doping much harder. And we've officially reached the point where the anti-doping system has been outmaneuvered by a makeout session. So if she really wants to win a gold medal, forget fencing. She deserves one for the most creative excuse in sports history, or maybe a Lifetime Achievement Award in Olympic storytelling. But hey, at the end of the day, an excuse is only bad if it doesn't work, and hers worked. Bravo. All right, that is going to do it for another edition of Gordon Damer on Sports. Before we go, do me a favor, hit that subscribe button if you have not already. Leave a review, share the podcast with a friend, and if you want more thoughts like this delivered straight to your inbox, head over to GordonDamer.com and sign up for my free newsletter. We'll be back next time with more on Gordon Damer on Sports.